Sometimes when someone pulls away, it can feel like they've forgotten you overnight. But let's be real, people don't just stop caring because they're distant. In fact, the very distance often hides the truth that they're feeling more than they'd like to admit. Avoidant personalities don't always pick up the phone or flood your inbox with late night confessions. They're wired to pull back when emotions get overwhelming, but that doesn't mean the feelings aren't there. Quite the opposite. The signs they miss you often leak out in unexpected ways. Here are 5 unmistakable clues your avoidant ex is missing you like crazy. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to miss you, one of the clearest ways it shows up is in the small, subtle actions they take to keep a connection alive without fully committing to being vulnerable. They may not be the type to send a heartfelt message or openly admit they're thinking about you, but the way they quietly resurface in your world reveals far more than they realize. It might be something as simple as them watching every Instagram story you post, liking a picture from weeks ago, or leaving a small comment that seems innocent on the surface but is loaded with hidden meaning. These are not random accidents. They're calculated, controlled attempts to step back into your orbit without exposing themselves to rejection. An avoidant person has a deep conflict when it comes to intimacy. On one hand, they crave closeness, but on the other, closeness feels threatening. So when they miss you, they don't rush back in with declarations of love. Instead, they use these small digital breadcrumbs to signal, I'm still here, I still care, while keeping their defenses intact. Think about it. If someone truly didn't care anymore, they wouldn't even bother to look. They wouldn't track what you're doing, and they certainly wouldn't engage in your online world. That little heart they leave on a photo might look insignificant, but in the language of an avoidant ex, it speaks volumes. Sometimes this resurfacing doesn't happen online at all. It can come through mutual friends. Maybe one of your friends casually mentions that your ex asked how you were doing or seemed curious about what you've been up to. This isn't small talk. This is them finding a safe channel to peek back into your life without the risk of facing you directly. They're trying to soothe the ache of missing you without stepping into the vulnerability of admitting it. It's indirect, but it's intentional. Another subtle way they might resurface is by suddenly showing interest in places, hobbies, or topics that connect back to you. Perhaps they start going to that cafe you used to visit together, or they bring up a movie you loved in casual conversation. These aren't coincidences. They're little nudges, gentle reminders of the bond you shared, and a way of saying, I still remember. Avoidant exes rarely operate in a straightforward manner when emotions are involved, but these patterns of resurfacing betray the fact that you still occupy their mind. What makes these actions so telling is the fact that avoidance usually drives people to shut down, to detach, to create distance. So when you see them putting energy into showing up in your world, even in the smallest of ways, it means the internal pull they feel toward you is stronger than the instinct to withdraw. It's their way of dipping a toe back into the water without diving in. They don't want to feel the vulnerability of saying, I miss you, but they do want you to notice their presence, to feel their shadow brushing against your life. It can be confusing when you're on the receiving end of this because the signals are so mixed. You may think, if they really missed me, why don't they just say it? But that's not how the avoidant mind works. For them, resurfacing subtly is safer. It protects them from the risk of rejection while still feeding the longing they feel. It allows them to get close without feeling exposed. These subtle actions aren't random or meaningless. They are the avoidant's unique way of expressing that their heart hasn't let go, even if their words never say it out loud. When an avoidant ex begins bringing up old memories, it often slips out in ways that feel casual, but those moments are charged with far more emotion than they would ever admit. They are not the type to linger on the past openly, because dwelling on feelings makes them uncomfortable. Yet when someone with an avoidant style misses you, the past becomes their safe doorway back into your world. They may not send a message that says, I miss you, but they'll find a way to recall that restaurant you went to, the funny thing that happened on a trip, or the private joke only the two of you would understand. These memories serve as their bridge to connection without requiring them to expose their vulnerability outright. Think about how memory works in relationships. We don't revisit moments that meant nothing to us. When a person deliberately recalls something shared, it's because that experience still lives inside them. For an avoidant, this is particularly telling because they are usually so focused on moving forward, on detaching, and on avoiding the emotional weight of closeness. So when they circle back to a memory with you, it's not random nostalgia, it's a sign that they are reliving the times that made them feel something real. And because direct expressions of longing are too risky for them, they use memories as a safer vessel to communicate what's really going on inside. This resurfacing of memories can show up in different ways. They might text you about a place you once went together, saying, "Remember when we got lost trying to find that little cafe?" On the surface, it looks playful, but underneath, it's them reaching for the emotional anchor of that shared moment. They might comment on social media about something you used to laugh about, hoping it reignites that spark without the heaviness of confessing their current feelings. Sometimes they don't even reach out directly, but bring up your name in conversations with friends, referencing the things you both did. It's as if they're rehearsing the memory in safe spaces before daring to bring it to you. When an avoidant person misses you, these memories become a comfort zone. Unlike the present, which demands vulnerability and risk, the past feels safe because it's already known. It allows them to engage emotionally without feeling trapped. They can relive the warmth of your connection without having to confront the fear of being hurt again. But ironically, by doing this, they reveal how much they're still emotionally invested. A person who has truly moved on doesn't spend time replaying old moments. The fact that your ex is bringing up these shared experiences is proof that those moments still have a grip on them. Another subtle layer is the type of memories they choose to highlight. Notice that avoidant exes rarely bring up arguments or negative times. Instead, they focus on the lighter, more meaningful experiences, the laughter, the intimacy, the things that made them feel alive with you. This selective memory shows that deep down, they're clinging to the parts of the relationship that gave them joy. Even though avoidance pushes them to minimize closeness, their heart gravitates toward the times when closeness felt safe and good. Those are the snapshots they carry with them, and when missing you becomes too strong, they let those snapshots leak out into conversation. For you, hearing an avoidant ex recall these memories can be confusing. It might feel like they're just being friendly or that they're toying with your emotions. But what's really happening is that they're revealing the struggle between their fear of intimacy and their longing for connection. The memories are not random chatter. They're a signal. They're saying, "This meant something to me, and it still does." And even though they may never say those exact words, their choice to revisit those shared moments is their indirect confession that the bond you had still echoes in their heart. Jealousy is one of the clearest cracks in the armor of an avoidant ex, and it often shows up in ways that seem subtle at first, but are actually very revealing. An avoidant person is trained, in a sense, to keep emotions under control. They pride themselves on appearing unaffected, on staying cool and detached. But when they see you moving on with your life, enjoying yourself, or even getting attention from others, the mask slips. They may not run to you and confess, "I still want you," but their reactions will betray the truth. Jealousy for them is like an involuntary reflex. It spills out before they've had the chance to manage it, and it tells you more than their carefully chosen words ever could. Sometimes this jealousy looks like irritation at things that shouldn't bother them anymore. They might comment on a photo of you going out, asking with mock curiosity who you were with, or making a remark that's slightly edged. They might get defensive or sarcastic, pretending they don't care, but the very fact they're bringing it up means they're paying attention. If they were indifferent, they wouldn't even notice. That sudden energy around your happiness is a sign they feel replaced, and underneath their controlled exterior, they're struggling with the idea of you slipping out of their reach. Other times, the jealousy shows in more indirect ways. An avoidant ex might start competing with you without admitting it. If they see you posting about traveling, they might suddenly highlight their own adventures. If you're seen with new people, they may go out of their way to showcase their own social life or even hint at new romantic interests. On the surface, it looks like they've moved on, but the truth is, these behaviors are often a reaction to you. They want you to see them, to feel a little of the same discomfort they feel when they imagine you with someone else. It's their way of rebalancing the emotional scales because jealousy for them is difficult to confront directly. In some cases, jealousy can also come through silence. You may notice them pulling back after you've shared something that shows you're thriving. Instead of congratulating you or showing support, they retreat. That withdrawal isn't because they don't care, it's because what they saw triggered them. They're grappling with emotions they'd rather avoid, and silence becomes their coping mechanism. Yet that silence, instead of proving indifference, is evidence of the intensity of their feelings. They're missing you so much that the thought of you moving forward without them stings too deeply to acknowledge. What makes jealousy such a powerful indicator is that it's involuntary. An avoidant ex can control when they text, how much they reveal, and whether they make an effort to stay in your life. But they can't fully control the pang they feel when they realize you're no longer revolving around them. They can't suppress the discomfort of imagining you giving your attention and affection to someone else. And because jealousy breaks through the walls they usually hide behind, it exposes the longing they've been trying so hard to cover. You might even notice this jealousy surfacing in conversations with others. They may ask mutual friends about you in a way that reveals they're checking who you're with or how you're doing. They might disguise it as curiosity, but what they're really seeking is reassurance. They want to know they still matter, that they haven't been replaced. It's their way of confirming that the bond you shared isn't as disposable as their avoidant defenses sometimes make it seem. When an avoidant ex feels jealous, it's not about control or manipulation the way it might be in other dynamics. It's more about vulnerability leaking through the cracks. They miss you, they want you, but they don't know how to express that directly. So their jealousy becomes the unintended confession. Every time they react to your joy, your independence, or your connections with others, they are unconsciously revealing how invested they still are. Behind the cool exterior and the withdrawn behaviors, their heart is still deeply entangled with you. And jealousy is the proof that missing you has become impossible to hide. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant ex is missing you is when they start reaching out with what seem like flimsy excuses. These aren't straightforward admissions of longing, but rather carefully constructed ways of testing whether the door between you is still open. Avoidant personalities fear rejection deeply, so they rarely risk putting themselves in a position where they might hear no or feel unwanted. Instead, they create low-stakes reasons to reconnect. It could be something as small as asking about a restaurant you once went to, pretending they can't remember the name, or sending a message about a piece of clothing they think they left at your place months ago. On the surface, these excuses look practical, but underneath, they are thinly veiled attempts to see if they still have access to you. What's important to recognize is that these little messages are not really about the topic itself. If they ask you about a book you once mentioned, they could easily search for it online. If they claim they forgot the details of an event you both attended, they likely remember more than they're admitting. The point of reaching out isn't to get the answer, it's to see how you'll respond. Will you reply warmly? Will you engage with them? Or will you ignore them? Each small test gives them information about whether they're still on your radar, whether you still care, and whether there's space for them to come closer again. Avoidant individuals thrive on control, and these excuses allow them to feel like they're in control of the situation. By keeping the contact surface level, they avoid putting themselves in a vulnerable position. They don't have to confess that they've been thinking about you, because the excuse gives them plausible deniability. If you respond positively, they get the reassurance they crave without risking too much. If you ignore them, they can retreat without feeling like they've exposed their true feelings. It's a delicate dance between wanting to reconnect and needing to protect themselves from emotional danger. These excuses can sometimes escalate gradually. They may begin with small, harmless check-ins like asking about your family or mentioning something that reminded them of you. Over time, if they feel encouraged by your responses, they might start creating bigger opportunities for interaction, perhaps suggesting they still have something of yours to return or asking for your advice on a topic they know you're knowledgeable about. Each excuse is a breadcrumb laid out to see how far they can go without having to fully admit what they're really after closeness with you again. From your perspective, these interactions might feel confusing. You may wonder why they're suddenly contacting you about trivial matters when the relationship is technically over. But what's really happening is that they're missing you as grown strong enough to push past their usual avoidant patterns. They want to reach out, but their fear of being too exposed forces them to package it in these indirect ways. The more excuses they make, the clearer it becomes that you're still heavily on their mind. Sometimes their excuses even come with a touch of clumsiness that makes them more transparent than they realize. They may send a message late at night about something unimportant, or suddenly appear in your inbox after weeks of silence, pretending it's about something practical. The timing and randomness reveal what their words don't, that the real motivation is emotional, not logical. These are the cracks in the wall they've built, the ways they let their longing leak through without fully admitting it. An avoidant ex using excuses to contact you is essentially saying, I want to see if I can still reach you, but I'm not ready to risk being rejected outright. It's not about the excuse itself, it's about the need to bridge the distance. Every little message, every small mistake or forgotten detail is their cautious way of stepping back into your life. And while they may frame it as casual, it's actually one of the most telling signs that missing you has become too strong for them to suppress. One of the most powerful signs that an avoidant ex is missing you isn't found in what they say, but in the inconsistency of their behavior. The silence, followed by sudden reappearances, speaks volumes. At first, the quiet might make you think they've moved on completely, but if you pay attention, you'll notice the rhythm of push and pull. They disappear for a while, leaving you wondering if you ever mattered, and then out of nowhere, they resurface with a text, a like, or some small gesture that pulls them back into your awareness. This inconsistency is not carelessness. It's a reflection of their inner conflict. They miss you, they crave closeness, but at the same time, the thought of being vulnerable terrifies them. Avoidant personalities often need distance to regulate their emotions. When missing you becomes too strong, they retreat to create space for themselves, convincing their mind they're in control. But emotions don't vanish just because someone pushes them down. The longing builds, and eventually it breaks through the walls they've built. That's when they resurface, sometimes subtly, sometimes more directly. To the outside observer, it might look confusing or even manipulative, but what's really happening is a battle inside them, the desire to reconnect colliding with the fear of being hurt. You might notice this pattern play out in subtle ways. They stop communicating for days or weeks, only to suddenly reach out with something random. As if no time has passed, they might vanish from watching your social media, then return to view every single story you post. This back and forth isn't because they don't know what they want. It's because they want two opposing things at once. They want the comfort of you, the bond, the familiarity, but they also want to avoid the vulnerability that comes with admitting it. Their silence is a shield, and their reappearance is a confession they can't keep the distance forever. This cycle of silence and reappearance reveals just how deeply they're missing you. If they had truly detached, they wouldn't need to check back in. They wouldn't feel that pull to resurface once the absence became unbearable. The very act of returning, even after creating distance, shows that their heart hasn't let go. For avoidant exes, missing someone rarely shows up in grand gestures. Instead, it leaks out in these inconsistent behaviors that betray their inner turmoil. What makes this so difficult for the person on the receiving end is the confusion it creates. You may find yourself questioning, why do they keep coming back if they don't want to stay? But the truth is, both sides of their behavior are genuine. When they're silent, they're trying to protect themselves from feelings they believe are too overwhelming. When they reappear, it's because the feelings became too strong to suppress. Both are real, and both are part of the way avoidance manifests when love and longing collide. Even in their silence, there's meaning. An avoidant ex doesn't go completely quiet unless they're battling with emotions that feel too big to manage. That silence can be deafening because you can sense it isn't indifference, it's avoidance. And when they return after that silence, even in the smallest way, it's proof that missing you pushed them past their comfort zone. That inconsistency is not a sign of a lack of care, but rather evidence of how much they still feel. So when you notice the pattern of withdrawal followed by reappearance, don't mistake it for randomness. It's the clearest window into the conflict inside them. They're drawn to you, they miss you, but they don't know how to stay close without feeling exposed. Their silence, as frustrating as it is, becomes a signal of longing. Their reappearance, no matter how small, is their way of saying they can't stay away forever. For an avoidant ex, that push and pull is the truest sign that you're still living rent-free in their heart. And so, when you step back and look at all of this, the resurfacing in subtle ways, the memories they can't let go of, the jealousy they can't fully hide, the excuses they use to test the waters, and the silence that speaks louder than words, you begin to see the truth. An avoidant ex doesn't miss you in obvious, sweeping gestures. They miss you in fragments, in contradictions, in little cracks where their feelings leak through despite their best efforts to control them. The very behaviors that confuse you, their inconsistency, their indirectness, their hesitation, are actually the signals that you left an impact too powerful to erase. Missing you doesn't look straightforward for them. It looks like distance mixed with longing, like withdrawal mixed with curiosity. And when you recognize these patterns, you stop mistaking their avoidance for indifference. You see it for what it truly is, their way of wrestling with emotions that, no matter how hard they try, refuse to go away. So, if you've been wondering whether they ever think about you, whether you still linger in their mind, let these signs reassure you. Because even in silence, even in subtle gestures, even in jealousy they try to disguise, the message is clear: you mattered. And in ways they may never fully admit, you still do. Thank you for being here and for giving your heart and mind the space to reflect on this. Whether you're listening to understand your ex better or to find closure for yourself, I hope these insights remind you of your own worth and the power of the connection you created. Take this with you, hold your head high, and remember, you are unforgettable. Thank you and goodbye.